Well, g'day guys, it's the Outback Legend here, and today what I want to talk to you guys about is Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline. What have we learnt from these two games, and what could be used from these two games that we could implement into Battlefield 5, or maybe even Bad Company 3 when they decide to bring that out? So I'm going to start off with Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline, and their pros and their cons. And then I'm going to move on later on into the video and talk about what sort of things could be taken from both of these games and implemented into Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3. So I hope you guys enjoy watching, and let's get started, shall we? Now we'll start off with Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4 is my favourite game in the franchise so far, and the reason being is that it's the first Battlefield game that was brought out on the next gen consoles. And that's my main reason behind why I really like it. I mean, I love Battlefield 3 too, but having 64 player servers is just pretty, it's pretty amazing to be able to play in servers that large and just have that much chaos going on around in the map. And that's what I think is a really good point of Battlefield 4. But that's something that's going to be implemented into future Battlefield titles from now on, because all the future Battlefield titles are going to be on the next gen consoles. Now, with Battlefield 4, the things that I really liked about it were vehicle gameplay. I thought, the vehicle gameplay was really good. It was a little bit out of balance at first, but now that DICE has actually gone in and brought out patches and updates and tweaked things, they've brought the vehicles into pretty good balance, I think. I certainly do think that tanks still need to have their armour buffed a bit, and the reason behind that is I just feel that tanks are a weapon that should be feared. Infantry see the tank rolling up the street and it's let's back off, regroup, and think about how we're going to deal with this. Unfortunately, weapons like the aswell make it very easy to take out a tank, because the tank starts to back off if it gets damaged, but the aswell is like a tow missile, so it sort of makes it a little bit unfair in my opinion. But that's my opinion. And my other gripe with the aswell is for choppers. It's especially for the attack chopper, and we all know that the attack choppers in Battlefield 4 are not very good. They're great on maps like Siege of Shanghai and Dawnbreaker, but for the big open maps like Golmud Railway or any maps like that really, it's just not very effective. And it's an attack chopper. It's something that's designed to take on the tanks and the LAVs, and it's got the gunner that's there to mow down the infantry. And having things like the aswell in it just made it really, really difficult to do well on big maps, which is unfortunate. And there is a simple way they could fix that, and that's just tone down the damage that it does to choppers. But I don't think that's going to happen, because Battlefield 4 is so late now. And we've got Battlefront 3 is just around the corner, so. But that's an idea for if they want to implement them into the next Battlefield game. Now, other things that I have a real gripe with Battlefield 4 are things like active radar. Active radar is a menace. It's something that I just do not like, and I know a lot of people don't like it, and it's not just the really good scout pilots or the jet pilots that don't like it. It also makes it unfair on people who are learning to fly, or just getting started in the game. And the reason why I think active radar is unfair is because of the simple fact that you can sit at the very back of the deployment where nobody can get you, and just sit there and just fire out missiles, and you'll start to damage the chopper, and sure enough, it's all over. and it just makes it very frustrating. Another thing that I was not very keen on was the staff shells in the tank, and the staff shells were another very frustrating weapon. They sort of took the skill out of tanking, and I think they should have scrapped that in development, same with the active radar, and I think they should have just taken that out and left the others in. I'm all for having, your Sabo shells and your HE shells and just your normal shells. I think they're great. And just the staff shells just sort of threw it out of balance. And I mean, now they've brought it into balance and nobody really uses it anymore, so I mean, I can't really complain about that, but it's something that back when the game was released, it was very frustrating. But that's just my opinion on those topics, really. Now, another thing with Battlefield 4 is the infantry gameplay. Now, the infantry gameplay is brilliant. I really enjoy it. I'm always playing as assault or support, running around with big old Petcheneg out. The thing that I really love about the infantry gameplay in Battlefield 4 is the variety of weapons. There's just so much variety you have. Every different weapon class, there is just so many different weapons you can choose from. And that really adds to the game. It's something that I really enjoy because one of the things that I love doing in Battlefield is getting a new gun and getting all the unlocks for it and, getting the mastery on it and everything like that. I feel that's something that they should definitely do for another Battlefield game, is have a huge variety of weapons. But the one thing I don't like about the infantry is the counter knife. And the reason why I don't like the counter knife is that it is just so glitchy. It just does not work. And half the time I get countered, it's just because I have just that little bit of lag or something like that. And I'll take somebody from behind and bang, I get countered. And I tell you, that is so infuriating. It's one of the most frustrating things I think I've ever had in Battlefield. It's just something that I think should have been scrapped in development. But thankfully, Visceral did that for Battlefield Hardline, and I hope that we do not see the counter knife again in a Battlefield game. And I know some players like it, but unfortunately, I feel that the majority of the players did not like it. A reason why I say that is because a lot of the big YouTubers who play Battlefield have said the same thing. You can even see on Battlelog there's a pretty big outcry about it. So, definitely something that should not make it back into a Battlefield game. So that's my opinions on the pros and the cons of Battlefield 4. Now, let's get started on Battlefield Hardline. Now, with Battlefield Hardline, I think it's a brilliant game, very well made, and my hat goes off to Visceral because it is their first big first-person shooter, and they've never done that before. I mean, they've made games like Dead Space and stuff like that, which Dead Space was a brilliant game, so you could already tell that Visceral were a very competent company with producing games. Now, for their first-person shooter game, and a Battlefield game at that, they did a brilliant job. It still has a lot of problems, but they're mainly balance issues. And the balance issues are just with the weapons. The M16, the M416, the K10, a little bit overpowered. They certainly could be nerfed. The K10, not so much now that it's been nerfed. It's more of a weapon that's devastating in close quarters, which is what it should be. But the M16 and the M416, I feel they need to be nerfed a little bit to bring them into line with the other weapons. But, I'm sure that that's going to come in a future patch. Now, another thing with Battlefield Hardline that I love is the netcoding. I rarely get shot around corners. Almost 90% of the time, if I shoot at somebody, I will get hit markers and they will drop very quickly. And I think that's really good. Another thing is the time to kill with the weapons. It's a little bit shorter than Battlefield 4, and it feels like Battlefield 3. And I really liked the infantry gameplay in Battlefield 3. So I'd feel personally the infantry gameplay in Battlefield Hardline is a little bit better than Battlefield 4. And I'm glad for that, because Battlefield Hardline is definitely a more infantry orientated game. Now, there are a lot less vehicles in Battlefield Hardline. I mean, there are the attack choppers, which are absolutely devastating if you know how to use them. And the counter-attack trucks, they can be devastating, but you've got to really be tactical with them. And I feel they could do with a bit of a buff, and mainly just against explosive weapons, just to give you a little bit more of a chance to get out of there and get away from everything so you can repair and come back into the battle. Another thing they could do with the counter-attack trucks, speed up the reverse of them so you can back up quicker. But they are pretty good the way they are. But I do certainly think they could do with a bit of a buff. So, another thing that I have with Battlefield Hardline, which I personally feel is a little bit of a problem, is the shotguns. They just don't feel consistent. I've noticed, particularly if I shoot at somebody, it will take a second or two for the kill to actually pop up, and more often than not, they'll actually be able to shoot me and we'll get a kill trade. And that kind of makes it a bit frustrating. The only shotgun that I've found that doesn't really do that is a double-barreled. And, I mean, the problem with the double-barreled shotgun, of course, is you've only got 2 shots. Another thing that I don't particularly like with Battlefield Hardline is there's just not enough variety of weapons. I think that if they added in a lot more weapons to the game, it would certainly make it a lot more enjoyable, because, to be honest, it does get a little bit boring using the same weapon over and over and over. And, I mean, there's just not that much of a variety of weapons. And the other issue is that with the license you buy to obtain a weapon on both teams, I personally feel that 1200 kills is just a little bit too much. I think maybe they should bring it down to 500 kills. And the reason why I say that is because that's like with unlocking a mastery dog tag in previous Battlefield titles. So instead of getting a mastery dog tag, you can buy the license for it. And I think that would be a brilliant idea. That's sort of my main gripes with Battlefield Hardline, is just the weapon balance. And, of course, the lack of variety of weapons. But apart from that, everything else in the game I think is fine. I think it's definitely a very well made game, and as I said before, my hat goes off to Visceral for their work, especially being as it's their first person shooter. Now, one thing that I feel they could do with both Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline is, I feel they've put in too many game modes. And I know having different game modes is a very good thing, because, you know, game modes like Rush and Conquest and Team Deathmatch and Domination and Capture the Flag and all that, they're all a lot of fun. But the one thing I feel is a problem is that a lot of new game modes that are brought out, they just don't get played. And take, for instance, Carrier Assault in Battlefield 4. That didn't really get played much. I never actually played a game mode of that because on the Australian servers, nobody played it. I do kind of hope to actually see that again in a future Battlefield title, but I hope they bring it out at launch so that everybody gets to play it. Now that's really my opinion on both Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline and their pros and their cons, and what sort of things could be done to improve them and that sort of thing. Now, let's talk about Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3. What sort of things could we take from Battlefield 4, Battlefield Hardline, and put into the next Battlefield game? Now, personally, I think what they need to do at launch is have less game modes, and don't add so many game modes in future DLCs either. Because at the end of the day, with Battlefield 4, most of the game modes didn't get played all that much. And same with Battlefield Hardline, I sort of feel there's a few too many game modes, and there's no DLC out yet, and a lot of the game modes aren't really played all that much. So, I think at launch for Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3, less game modes. Now, another thing I think they should do is, at the start of the game, have a big variety of different weapons for every different class. I think that would be a brilliant idea, because that way then, whilst we're waiting for the next DLC to come out, we'll have a lot of weapons to use and try out and work on and have a lot of fun with. So, I think that would be a good idea. Another good idea I think they need to do is to make vehicles a little bit more feared. Vehicles like the main battle tank, I think that should definitely be something that infantry players should see and run from. And I don't mean run to another objective, I mean run, hide, and use teamwork to bring him down. You know, because as I've said, Battlefield's a team-based game. So, tanks should be definitely a weapon that should be feared. LAVs not so much, because they are a light armoured vehicle, and, you know, after all they're called infantry fighting vehicles, so they should definitely be able to take a lot less of a pounding than what the main battle tanks would, but I still think they should be very formidable. The other vehicle that I think in particular needs to be buffed and stuff for the next Battlefield game is most definitely the attack choppers, because as I've said before, in Battlefield 4 on maps like Golmud Railway, they just weren't very effective. And that's mainly because they get destroyed too quickly by weapons like stingers and iglas and stuff like that. And a way they could fix that would be to bring down the range of stingers and iglas, which I think that would be a good idea, but then it makes it hard because you can't really lock onto the jets. So the best way I think they could work around it would be to make the attack choppers a lot more armoured, so they can take a lot more of a pounding, and they do have a chance to get out of there, get repaired, and come back into the battle. So, you know, so players can at least do well in them and enjoy flying them. Now, as for vehicles, they're the only real things I think they need to really fix with them, is mainly just the tanks and the attack chopper. Another thing that I think they should get rid of completely and not put into the next Battlefield title is definitely active radar and staff shells. Because, as I said, they're not very fair, and they're very unbalanced, and they throw the game out of balance. So I think they should scrap them and maybe think of something else, something that would work, something that would be balanced, and something that wouldn't give players an unfair advantage. So that's mainly what I think they should do for the vehicles. Now, another thing for Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3 is, for the engineer class, I think maybe less rocket launchers. Reason being is, you know, as I said, stuff like the SRAW and the MBT law just sort of threw it out of balance. I know the MBT law got nerfed in the end and people don't really use them, but at the start of Battlefield 4 they were a menace. There was pretty much no protection against them, they fired really quick and they went through active protection. So, bit of a problem there. Reason why I think they should get rid of the SRAW is because it's like a tow missile, and unfortunately if you're in a tank there's no real way to get away from them, especially on big open maps like Golmud Railway, and rogue transmission, you know, stuff like that. And my other big problem with the S-Raw was they were very easy to spawn camp with, especially on Siege of Shanghai, before they changed where the choppers spawn. So often you would get players that would get up on top of one of the buildings and they would just sit there and wait for the attack chopper with the S-Raw, and as soon as it would spawn they would fire, and before the pilot even had time to take off, bang, they were gone. And that was really frustrating. And that's another reason why I'm against having the S-Raw in a future Battlefield game, is mainly just for those kind of reasons. Now the next thing I think that they should do with Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3 is think about the infantry gameplay. Now, me personally, I'd like to see very similar infantry gameplay to Battlefield Hardline or Battlefield 3, because it's very smooth. It's very smooth and thoroughly enjoyable, and it just feels better than Battlefield 4 in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, Battlefield 4's infantry gameplay is still brilliant, but I just feel that with Battlefield Hardline, it's just a little bit better. And I think the reason why it's better is because it's mainly an infantry-based game. So I think they should definitely think about doing that. And another thing that I think would be a great idea for the next Battlefield game would be to add in a few more infantry-orientated maps, like Grand Bazaar and Sen Crossing on Battlefield 3. They were really good maps, and I'd like to see something similar in the next Battlefield title, because, you know, a lot of people enjoy playing mainly just infantry, so I think that would be a great idea, would be to have a few maps that are just infantry-based maps. And with the map design and the maps, I think they should base certain maps around certain game modes only, like what they did with Battlefield Hardline. I think that would be another brilliant idea, instead of creating the one map and then adding in all these different game modes and trying to work them around it, and quite often it didn't work out so well. I think instead, for certain game modes, they should have certain maps that are designed solely for that purpose. And that's really what I think would make the next Battlefield title a really great game. And of course, the last thing I'd like to say for it would be make sure that they work on having a smooth launch. I mean, Battlefield 4's launch was a disaster. Battlefield Hardline's launch was a lot better. I think they should definitely work towards that, so that they don't lose players at the start and they keep people playing the game right through. And that's really mainly what I wanted to say. That's my ideas for Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3, and I'd really like to hear your opinions down in the comments, so please leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought, let me know what your opinion is and what you'd like to see. And also, don't forget to check out my other videos, because I'm sure you guys will like it. And don't forget to drop me a like and a subscription. And this is the Outback Legend, signing off. I'll catch you next time. Take it easy, guys.